What if, all your life you thought that you were a slave, and you were treated disrespectfully by a white racist owner? But you eventually escaped, and discovered that you are living in the modern time, where black people are now free from slavery. Welcome to What a Story. Today, I'm going to tell you a true story about Alice. The story opens in a remote Georgia plantation location. Alice has been a slave on the farm for years and has been pining for escape. One night, Alice secretly wed Joseph, her adored husband. However, Mr. Paul broke up their union with a gunshot. The following morning, while at work, Joseph spotted a rabbit and caught it, but Mr. Paul thought otherwise and severely beat him. Alice, who saw how severely Mr. Paul had beaten Joseph, dropped a glass cup. When Alice and Ruthie decided to check on Joseph at night to see how he was doing, they found other staff members tending to his wound. They discussed escaping, but realized that the price of a mistake in their strategy would be death, so they decided against it. Alice said that there should be another way. Joseph told Alice that Mr. Paul knows of their marriage. The next day, people gather at the local church. Mr. Paul is preaching about procreation, that it is God's plan for them to be fruitful, including their domestic livestock. Joseph was approached by Mr. Paul the next day. He desired to marry him with the housekeepers employed by his brother. However, Joseph declines. Joseph is forced to accept the marriage in the given circumstances. The first child Joseph would have will belong to Brother Levi under the deal Mr. Paul and Brother Levi have made. One evening, Alice is bringing meals to Mr. Paul's mother. He reminded him that it was Sunday. She then enters a room. She begins reading after spotting some books. Then Mr. Paul walks into the room. She is instructed not to occupy his seat. Alice was told that she must understand that she was taught to read so she could read it to him. Then he locked the door. He proceeds to satisfy himself. Joseph got frustrated and started looking for a way out. He talked to a friend, who told him a story about someone who tried to get away but was killed and buried instead. When Joseph visits a graveyard, he finds a lighter buried there. The son of Mr. Paul visited him. The boy shrugged when he asked the youngster if he liked his school. Alice greeted the boy and was tasked to prepare food for him. Mrs. Bennet welcomes his grandson. That evening, when Alice was turning out the lights, she heard a strange noise. Mr. Paul's son opens the door. When she asked Mr. Paul's mother about life outside, she was told that it included the entire world. That same evening, Joseph crept in while she was in her room, drew her attention, and handed her the lighter. They need to flee because there is so much going on that they are unaware of, and Joseph instructs Alice to wait for his signal to do so. The next day, Alice reads a book to Mr. Paul and his son, while Joseph is doing his daily task on the plantation. Joseph called Aaron, Mr. Paul's assistant. When Aaron went to Joseph to check him out, Joseph immediately tried to steal his gun. Unsuccessful, Joseph ran away but was shot. Alice told Joseph to run as far as he could. Alice was worried for Joseph. He was eventually returned to Mr. Paul lifeless. Although Alice is trying to maintain her composure, she is in shock. Mr. Paul invited Alice to join him at the dinner table the following evening, when he ate supper with his son. Instead, he began to patronize her attractive figure, which infuriated her and caused her to assault Mr. Paul. She's so mad for what he did to Joseph.
Stop!
However, he defeated her, and requested Aaron to help him tie her up with a rope, while he also placed a gag over her mouth. Then, throughout the night, he abandoned her outside on the ground. He released her from her tie the following morning, and told her he wished to put the incident behind them. He gave her a glass of water. Alice drank the water, then she hit Mr. Paul on the head with the glass. He then strangles her. Alice picked up the shattered glass and stabbed Mr. Paul in the eyes. She then runs away. Alice ran through nearby woods until she finally arrived at a highway. While Alice stood in the center of the highway, a truck was coming up behind her. The truck suddenly stopped only inches from where she was. She fell in front of the truck due to shock. She was brought inside the truck by the driver, Frank, who tried to calm her down, and start a discussion with her by informing her that the year was actually 1973. Alice shows Frank the lighter that Joseph gave her. Frank decided to take her to the hospital, so that she will receive treatment as he believed she had amnesia following the incident. He tracked her down and brought her to the main desk after she got lost in the hospital. While waiting for the receptionist, Alice observed magazines with black women on the covers. She was only able to provide her first name when the receptionist asked for more information. On the other hand, Frank had a change of heart and decided to see how Alice was doing, after leaving him at the hospital. He finds Alice in a room, and brings her to his workplace. Alice questioned Frank why they have domestics after seeing farm workers. Frank says they worked for his brother and are not slaves. Alice and Frank's brother met at the area where Frank had stopped. Frank then invited Alice to his home, where he gave her food, clothing, and a bed to sleep in. When Frank turned on the TV, Alice questioned if they were miniature humans. She heard the same sound from Mr. Paul's son's room. Alice is still perplexed by her new surroundings. Frank gave her food the following morning, and some reading material to help her remember things before work. He even played music to refresh her memory, but Alice did not recognize it. To contact Mrs. Rachel Bennett, Alice kept herself occupied by exploring the telephone directory. She also studied several books about the history of slavery, which helped her realize that she had been a slave for all this time. She contacted Mrs. Rachel Bennett, who is married to Mr. Paul, after dialing multiple names from the phone book and making a meeting request. Mrs. Bennett gave her a location where to meet. When Frank was requested to report a coworker taking blackberries at work, he questioned his brother's decision. Alice had already prepared dinner for him when he got home. Alice assured him that she had not forgotten who she was, where she had come from, or that she had been a slave. Frank did not believe her. Alice informed Frank that she would be meeting someone the next day. Before departing the next day, Alice cuts her hair and changes into a new outfit. Frank took her to the diner where she would meet Mrs. Bennett. He offered to follow her inside, but she declined. When Mrs. Rachel Bennett and her son Daniel entered the diner, they started talking to Alice about all that had happened to her. She tried to make a house for her that was secure and orderly, but Alice opposed it, saying it was all a lie. Alice argued with Mrs. Rachel Bennett, claiming that she had neglected them and left them to suffer. She assured her that she no longer feared her.
Alice! Shut the hell up! Yes.
Mrs. Rachel Bennett immediately left with her son, and Alice chased her as she drove off. Alice resisted Frank's attempts to calm her down, saying she wanted to return and save the others at Mr. Paul's plantation. Before starting the rescue operation, Alice conducted more studies. Frank, however, tried to convince her not to participate in the rescue operation. Frank could not assist her because he lost his mother in the same battle. Alice persuades him that he can change. Frank warned her that if a black guy attempted to search for freedom in territory owned by white people, he would be put to death. She bluntly told Frank that doing the right thing is not a bad idea, and that he is wrong for not believing. Frank asked what her plan was and brought out guns for her. She brought out a map to find the location of the plantation, and was hoping Frank would join her. The next day, Frank called Alice to say he was backing out. Alice felt betrayed, but she was not giving up on her mission, so she went ahead with her plan. Frank was uneasy at work and told his brother to leave him alone. Alice is at the bus station waiting for the bus, then Frank drives up to her in his truck and asks her to get in, so they can go ahead with the mission together. Alice began spreading fuel around the area, and Frank made a call to a fire station. Alice assured Frank that his mother would be proud of him for standing up for justice and that she was proud of him. Mr. Paul heard the noises outside, and realized the forest behind the plantation is on fire. Mr. Paul told everyone to relocate to the back of the shacks as the truck approached, but nobody complied. Suddenly, Alice and Frank emerged from the vehicle. Alice then aims the rifle at Mr. Paul. Frank prevented Aaron from approaching after he tried to. Mr. Paul asked her what she wanted. She wanted everyone to know the truth, that they were done working for him. According to Mr. Paul, he never told anyone they could stay or go, instead claiming to have given them a meaningful life.
Oh, a meaningful life!
Alice shot him in the knee, tied him up, and dragged him outside. Firefighters and police are en route. Everyone present observed Alice tying Mr. Paul to a rod outside. Joseph emerged from the shacks, as Frank went up to meet the firefighter squad. With tears in her eyes, Alice embraced him while moving closer. A firefighter approached Alice, and asked her name. Thank you for watching, and see you on the next story.